What's up, guys? So one of my subscribers who's been around for a while, Jay, actually had a chance to play in a simul against a Grandmaster. So that's what we're looking at here. Jay was black, and the Grandmaster, Josh, was playing the simul against, I don't know how many people were in the simul, but he was playing against several people at the same time. So we're going to look at this game. Jay got off to a really good start, and then things kind of started to fall apart. So we're going to talk about what went wrong, and there are some good learning lessons here. So you're not going to want to miss this one, but let's go ahead and take a look. And by the way, Jay's about 1600 rapid on chess.com. And of course, Josh is the GM. So, all right, here we go. Knight of 3. Okay. Developing. That's good. Knight comes in. You know, sometimes giving up this bishop, I don't personally like to do that because when they fianchetto the bishop, if you lose the bishop that can counter it, it can be tough. But I do like the idea of putting all the pawns on on light squares like this. That is a very good idea to sort of blunt the effectiveness of the bishop. And in that case, it actually makes sense that you can get rid of this bishop because you have all your pawns on that color. So it's actually okay. And we get a trade here. Queen to b3, so going for the weak pawn here. Queen to b6, this is a good move. Even though you can get doubled pawns, you do stop the threat. You also get the half open a file, so you get some pressure here, which is nice. And so I like that move. Queen c7, bishop c5, very aggressive developing move with tempo. So that's a good move. And I guess because the simul, I'm guessing the GM probably just missed that if he castled, the e2 pawn would be hanging. So probably a better move would be something like e3, or just trading here first and then maybe e3 or something, or trading and then castling, something like that. But after this was actually a pretty significant mistake because now we have bishop takes e2. And white's in a little bit of trouble because if they try to play rook e1, you've got bishop takes f2 and you just completely win the rook here. So that's not even an option. So only move that white had to kind of keep him in the game, which he of course found, was d4. And the idea is it's attacking the bishop, also attacking this bishop. So only move for black really to do here is to take the rook. And then after captures here, you got to move the queen because the queen's under attack, but you also are about to lose your bishop. So it's important, and Jay did a nice job of finding this, it's important to move your queen where it attacks another piece so that now if this happens, you can just take the knight and it's just a trade here, right? So Josh played bishop f4, going for the discovered attack on the queen. Now, capturing here, best move, that's fine. And you might say, well, what about knight to g6, which unleashes the bishop, attacks the queen, and at the same time attacks the rook? Well, it turns out that black actually has a nice little move here. This is kind of a tricky one to find, but if you want to pause and think through this, what do you think black should play here if this would have happened? This didn't happen in the game, but if this would have happened, what can black play? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move that what black should play is actually just bishop to e4, which attacks the queen, attacks the knight. And so if white did try to trade here, well, then we're just going to take the queen. Yes, there's a capture here, but that knight is trapped and it's going to be captured, and black can simply just kind of trade some things off, bring the king over. And eventually, once black takes this knight, black's just up a piece, right? So you got the two knights and rook against the bishop and rook. So it's basically just winning a piece. So that's one example. And then the other way that this could go down is if white just moves the queen somewhere, you can simply slide your queen over. After this takes, just developing, allowing the knight to just sit there. You're going to take it later. You're simply going to castle, so something like this. And again, queen, rook, and right now it's even. There's 3 pieces to 3 pieces. But remember, this guy's trapped, and once you take that, you're just going to be up a piece and a pawn, and it's just better for black. So that was kind of a, I would say, fairly complicated line, but yeah, bishop e4 would have been the move there. But in a simul, you know, this is not an easy position for even for a GM to sort through all that, because you can't just sit there and think for 10 minutes. If you're playing a simul, you have to kind of just think for a few seconds and then move, right? So he just took the bishop, which I think is the more kind of logical move. Keep the discovered attack here, get rid of that bishop, right? So queen e7, it's not a terrible move, but this is part of where the game started to fall apart. So right at this point, if you check Stockfish, it's almost -4, so -3.7. So black is way ahead. But there is this annoying threat, and you do have to deal with it properly, because if you don't do it, if you just sort of waste a move here, well, now white has knight g6, and it's not so easy for black, right? Well, the best way to handle this is actually knight to h5. And it's very tempting to say, I have to get out of the line of the bishop, right? But actually you don't. You can attack the bishop and eliminate it that way. Because if white tries the same thing, you're taking it and it's with check, right? And so white has to do this and you're fine. You've eliminated the threat. You're going to castle next move and be happy with your exchange up, right? So that would have been the best move. Queen e7 is okay, but we're going to see why that didn't turn out so great a few moves later. So goes back and castles. Okay, so this was the next kind of mistake, missing the fact that bishop d6 is going to win back the exchange. So if if Jay would have played something like queen e6 here, setting up to castle now, and there's no more skewer there, black is still doing very nicely, -3 for black. So that's what needed to happen, but we have castles. And now, and maybe he thought that, he could throw in this check and do something with some tactics, but they just don't actually work, and white's simply able to trade everything off. And so we get this position where if you check 2 pieces and a rook, 2 pieces and a rook, and black just has the 1 extra pawn. So very equal. It's still slightly better for black because of that extra pawn, but part of the problem is that's not an easy pawn to defend, right? It's very far. It can't be supported by this guy because this is in the way, at least not right now. The knights can't really do a good job of defending it. The rook can't even do a good job of defending it because the bishop is blocking. And white's king and rook, probably you're going to take it. So that's why it's kind of a tough position for black to play. That being said, Stockfish liked the idea of going for this pawn with both knights. So if you develop this knight to a6, this knight back here, putting pressure on that, that's what Stockfish wanted. Jay played here, which this is kind of a more logical move, bringing the knight to the center, so I understand that. Knight c3. This is a good move, getting the rook to the file. But rook d1, and here we go. The pawn is basically lost, right? Like I was mentioning. So this move I don't like. And if if you look at black's pawn structure, it's pretty good right now. All the pawns are pretty nice. There's not a lot of weaknesses. As soon as you play this move, takes. Well, now you have. We already knew that was a goner, right? But now you have another weakness here. This d5 pawn is isolated. How are you going to defend that? Yeah, you got the knight, but it looks like eventually that's going to fall too, right? So I don't like that, creating that weakness. I think, let's see, what would have been a better move here? Maybe just something like b6, trying to undermine this and get rid of this really strong bishop. Makes sense. Stockfish is saying knight e5 was a better chance, because you want to try to go over to c4 and then hop in here or attack some of this stuff. Right, so yeah. Something that doesn't mess up the pawn structure would have made more sense. All right, but anyway, we get this. And now I want you to notice something very important. So this is still a pretty equal position. It's better for white because now this is weak and the bishop is stronger than the knight at this point, because pawns are on both sides of the board. And whenever you have positions like that, a bishop is going to do a very nice job because it can monitor both sides of the board. The knight kind of has to choose, right? So because of those things, and like I said, the isolated pawn, white's a little bit better. But notice what white does here. King to f2. White could have played a lot of pawn moves, and they decided, nope, I need to make sure my king is in the best position possible, right? So king f2 controls all these squares, so the rook can't do anything. And it's a little bit closer to the center, which we're going to look at in just a second. Notice what black does. h6, g5, h5, and look at black's king. So what Jay should have done, or what I would probably recommend, is at this point, try to bring the king up as best you can. Now, the bishop is very annoying because you can't come over this way, but you can go up to g6, and then maybe at some point you can come like this. Get that king involved, right? It's not doing anything on the back, and you're going to see in just a few moves later, here we go, more pawn moves, and now this. I don't like this decision because your pawns are going to be too extended, right? And your king is not doing anything, so check this out. We get a big trade, and look at white's king coming closer. And here we go, trade, coming closer, right? And now you can really see the difference. King is still on the back. This king is doing all sorts of things, defending this pawn, attacking this pawn, ready to invade, right? And that's kind of the story of this game, right? The king, look at this, and again, look at this, right? And here we go. Now the king is coming, but it's too late, and you can't really get through, right? The bishop and pawn are blocking it. And look at white's king. That's it. Like, that's why he won the game. Over here, and now it's just over. So big takeaway: active king at the end of the game is very good. Okay, so it's very tempting when you get to these end games and you're not really sure what to do, to just push pawns. but try to activate your king as best as you can. It is a tough position because of the bishop. That bishop is so strong, and normally you would just want to simply bring your king over. You can't, so you have to kind of maybe come like this, like I talked about, and try to figure out an alternate route. But moral of the story, active king at the end of the game is what you want to do. All right, so hopefully you guys learned something from that game and found it helpful. As always, thanks for watching. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.